Hello from Victoria's beautiful State Library. You might remember on Monday night's program we visited 3 different households in Melbourne to hear what they were hoping for from the budget. Tim and Sarah Whitehead have 2 children who Sarah stays home to look after. They're worried about cost of living pressures. Sharon and Paul Redmond live in a rented house because they can't afford to buy. Sharon's on a disability support pension and Paul runs a small gardening business. And Irving Stevens is a self-funded retiree and former school principal. They've all paid close attention to the budget and they're here with me now to give us their verdicts. Welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, Tim and Sarah. You told us on Monday that cost of living's a pretty constant pressure. Did you see much in the budget that you think will help you out?
There were a few carrots, but the main impact of the budget seems to be that the government has decided to freeze the family tax benefit, which is netting them $2 billion over the next 4 years. That's $2 billion that isn't then in the pockets of families, and I think it's at a time when we have very real cost of living pressures amongst families. So I think that's going to be a huge cost.
Tim, what stood out to you?
Oh, that was one of the big things that stood out, and I think it means that the big winners from the budget will be caravan parks, because that's where we're going to take our holidays for the next 3 years. The other thing that stood out was I was very pleased with what they did about health. It was really good to see so much extra funding for disability services. To go from $700 million to $2.2 billion is a really good recognition of the importance of that area. The unfortunate thing is that they're so keen to get the budget back and balanced by 2013 that a lot of that spending is not going to happen until 2014 and later, and that's a bit disappointing.
Irving, on this point about the surplus and the budget being in surplus, is that something that's important to you?
Yes, I believe so, but I suspect it's better for the budget to go into deficit on occasions when it can provide the necessary additional social services.
So what did you think overall of the budget this year?
I'm relatively pleased about it. I think it's tried to develop an environment of a healthy economic environment, which is good for business, good for profits, good for superannuation, good for returns to self-funded retirees. A pretty selfish approach, I know, but that's the reality of it.
So overall, when you look at it, does it make you better off, worse off, about the same?
Oh, I'm glad you gave me the other alternative. About the same, reasonably comfortable, I suggest.
Okay. Sharon, Tim mentioned before extra funding for disabilities. How does the budget affect you?
I don't think it affects me at all. There has been no change. If I was to go to work 2 or 3 days a week, I would be at a disadvantage. It would cost me more in medications, and I wouldn't be able to make any headway. There's also been a lot of funding dropped off if you want to become a leader or have a voice as a person with a disability. You're really at the mercy of the bureaucrats. You can take a job in a supermarket or do a low-level job, but there is nothing there for moving ahead.
Well, one of the things that the Treasurer was emphasising is that he wants to try to get all sorts of people back into work, and you've told us that you're very keen to get into work. Do you see nothing in the budget that you think is going to help you be able to do that?
No, if I'd like to get ahead and have a career, I don't see anything there that can assist me.
Paul, what about you with your small business? Did the budget deliver anything for you?
Very little. I don't think things have changed much at all. There's a $5,000 help pre-tax for assets, so if you want to get into new assets, there's a little bit of help there. But apart from that, there's not a lot for me.
One of the things that they're spending a bit of money on is education. Sarah, you were saying that that's an issue that you care a lot about. What did you think about the education part of the budget?
My main concern about the education package is the benefit for individual teachers. I think in an environment where we're trying to build community, we're trying to build skills amongst teachers and for them to support each other, I think it's quite a divisive policy, and it's problematic in terms of singling out individual achievement in that kind of environment.
Well, Irving, you're a former school principal. What do you think of that policy?
Oh, yes, I think it's a bit of a disaster, the bonus for individual teachers. I think it's destructive and it's divisive.
And why do you think that?
I've had a fair amount of experience with performance review, and some people will set themselves targets that are readily obtainable. Others that want to do the best for the school will perhaps attack a more difficult target and not reach it, and therefore get 5% as against somebody else getting 15%. I think it's pretty destructive stuff. I would be happy to leave it to the principals, and perhaps if it's got to be, then make sure that it's allocated to a team of teachers that collectively have a common goal. And I would support that very strongly and have done so in the past.
One of the things that the government's hoping to try to do is to get people to move away from urban areas and to take jobs in regional places. Paul and Sharon, was that something that you'd ever consider, just uprooting from Melbourne and going and living in a regional spot?
Yes, we have considered it. We've looked at all angles, but I need access to hospitals, and quite specific hospitals for cystic fibrosis. The other end of the spectrum for work is that Paul has his business in inner city Melbourne.
So, Paul, it wouldn't be so easy for you to...
No, it wouldn't. You tend to find people in the more country areas, or DIY people. They do it themselves generally. There really isn't a great need for my type of service there. But no, it would be an option.
Tim and Sarah, what about for you? Would you ever consider taking your kids and going and living out in the country?
Well, we lived out in the country for a while. Before we met Sarah, lived in Bendigo. I lived in Kyabram, and living up there was great because I got to meet Sarah. But when we thought about having a family, we really wanted our kids to have the opportunities and education that you tend to get in the city. And if we were ever to consider it again, the government would, I think, need to do a lot more about regional schools and giving the same opportunities to the kids out there as we get here.
Would you want to send your children to a real school, such as a public school or a private school?
Depends on the quality of the school, mostly.
I like it.
So it's an infrastructure issue then, is it, for you guys? If there was better infrastructure available regionally, it'd be more of an option for you, Sarah?
It would. There's a significant cost to relocating in terms of your social relationships, though. Our children are very settled at their current school. They're very settled with their friendship groups. You know, we have a great support network in Melbourne. So relocating has significant costs.
One of the things that all of you said to us on Monday was that you felt like you were hoping that the budget might deliver a better sense of this government and what they stand for and what their direction is. I wanted to ask all of you if you felt that you've got that at all. Irving, starting with you.
Oh, yes, I think there's been marginal improvement. I think the centrepiece is the vocational education and training, and I'm quite excited about the prospects there. In fact, I wouldn't mind re-entering the workforce, Leigh.
Wayne Swan might take you. They need people.
They probably reckon I'm past it.
What about you guys? Do you feel that you've got any better grip on where the government's going?
I've been really pleased with the social policy initiatives that they've announced. Funding mental health, funding disabilities in schools, that's more of what we hope to see from this government. Tim?
And I'd agree with that, and certainly building more hospitals in the regions is really important. They've committed to that. And the funding for the regions generally, I think, is fantastic. After having lived out there, it's good to see that some of those things are being addressed.
Paul?
I still think that the government's got a very heavy emphasis on the resources boom, and if anything happens there, then things will change quickly. So I think we need to keep an eye on that.
Sharon?
I took note of Wayne Swan. I thought that his idea of getting everybody into the workforce was a good one. I don't believe that there is anything set up to get people into good jobs. I think that anybody that's unemployed doesn't want to start at a lower level job at my age.
We really appreciate all of you coming in and allowing us to follow you around and then to speak to you again after the budget. Thank you very much for making time for us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.